I never thought a backyard graduation party would be the night I finally stopped carrying a family that never once asked how heavy it was. Looking back, it wasn't my sister-in-law's cruelty that broke something loose in me. It was what my 14-year-old granddaughter whispered in the car on the way home. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It was the second Saturday of June, and the air in Clarksville, Tennessee, smelled like freshly cut grass and charcoal smoke. My son Marcus had worked 3 years toward his associate's degree while holding down a full-time job at the distribution warehouse. 3 years of early mornings, online classes squeezed between shifts, and falling asleep at the kitchen table. His wife Renee had held the household together through every single one of those nights. She'd packed his lunch, kept the kids quiet while he studied, and never once complained that their Saturday plans were always canceled. When Marcus finally walked across that stage, Renee cried before his name was even called. The graduation party was being held at my mother's house in Clarksville, a brick ranch on Millbrook Drive that I had maintained, repaired, and quietly kept standing for the better part of a decade. My mother, Dorothy, was 79 years old and sharp as she'd ever been. My younger brother Ray and his wife Connie had driven up from Murfreesboro. Connie had never worked a day in her adult life, a fact she wore like a medal. Renee had spent the entire previous week cooking, a full pot of her grandmother's collard greens, a sweet potato pie, cornbread from scratch, and a layered pasta salad that took her most of Friday afternoon. She also had our granddaughter Sophie help her put together something personal for Marcus, a hand-bound memory book, craft paper covers stitched together with twine, filled with photographs, ticket stubs from the kids' school plays he'd somehow attended between shifts, and handwritten notes from his children about what they were most proud of. In the truck on the way over, Renee held it on her lap like it was made of glass. "You think he'll love it?" Sophie asked from the back seat. "He's going to cry," I said. Renee smiled. "Men in this family cry at everything. Earn tears," I told her. Nothing wrong with that. When we arrived, Connie was already there. She was standing near the folding table my mother had set up in the backyard, rearranging the store-bought desserts she'd brought in their bakery boxes, adjusting each one so the logos faced outward. She had on a linen blouse that probably cost more than our car payment. She noticed the memory book the moment Renee set it on the gift table. "Did you make that yourself?" she asked. The tone was the same one you'd use to ask a child if they drew something on the wall. Sophie straightened her shoulders. "We made it together, Grandma and me." "How sweet." Connie turned back to her bakery boxes. "Homemade things have a certain charm." Nobody responded. Ray was pouring sweet tea and pretended he hadn't heard. My mother glanced over from the grill, then went back to turning chicken. That wasn't new. Over 12 years, I'd watched Connie sand Renee down in exactly that way. A remark about Renee's neighborhood growing up, a question about her salary that was really a comparison, a comment about her clothes at Thanksgiving that she'd made sound like a compliment. Never loud enough to confront, just quiet enough to plant a bruise and walk away clean. Every single time, I had told myself it wasn't worth ruining the occasion. Every single time, Renee had let it go with more grace than anyone should have had to use. Lunch was served a little after 1 o'clock. Marcus stood up to say a few words about what the degree had meant, about Renee, about the kids. His voice broke twice. Sophie reached over and squeezed his hand. Then Connie looked across the table at Renee. "You know," she said pleasantly, cutting into her chicken, "I always thought it was unusual. A man going back to school at his age. Most people who end up needing a degree later in life just didn't plan well enough the first time." The table went quiet. Renee set down her fork. "Connie." Her voice was steady. "Please don't." That was all. 2 words. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't reach for an insult. Just 2 words with 12 years of patience behind them. My mother put down her napkin and stood up. What happened next, I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand. She walked to Renee's side of the table, looked down at her, and said, "You've always thought you were better than this family. You're not." Then she pointed toward the back gate. "Take your grandchildren and go." Nobody moved. The sprinkler on the far side of the yard clicked on and off in the silence. Then I heard Sophie's voice beside me. "Grandpa." I turned. Her eyes were full. "Does great-grandma Dorothy not like us because we don't have as much money as Uncle Ray?" That question didn't sting. It didn't even hurt. It landed like something dropped from a great height. I set down my fork. I crouched beside her chair, and I took both her hands in mine the way I had when she was small enough to carry. "No, sweetheart." I looked her directly in the eyes. Great-Grandma Dorothy forgot that love doesn't come with a price tag. Sophie nodded once. She was 14. She understood more than she let on. I stood up. Renee was already folding her napkin. Marcus was sitting very still with his jaw tight, the way he always did when he was holding something back. I put my hand on his shoulder as I passed him, then I walked to Renee and helped her to her feet. "Get the kids," I said quietly. "James," my mother said behind me. I didn't stop. "James, we're not done here." I picked up the memory book from the gift table. I noticed one corner had been bent. It must have been knocked in the commotion when my mother stood. I smoothed it carefully and placed it under my arm. We walked out through the back gate without another word. The drive back to our house felt longer than the 18 miles it was. No one spoke for the first 20 minutes. The interstate stretched flat and pale ahead of us. I kept both hands on the wheel. Finally, Renee said softly, "I'm sorry." I felt something break open in my chest. "Don't you dare," I said. My voice was rough. "Don't apologize for her." She turned to look at me. "I just don't want today to be ruined for Marcus." "Today isn't ruined." I glanced in the rearview mirror. Marcus was staring out the window. Sophie had her head on his shoulder. What just happened is going to be the reason today mattered more than it should have. She didn't answer. She just reached over and held my hand the rest of the way home. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I went out to the garage. I had a habit of going there when I needed to think. There was an old tackle box on the third shelf, the one my father had left me, that I hadn't opened in years. Inside, wrapped in a paper towel and held with a rubber band, was a note he'd written me the year before he died. His handwriting was slanted and careful. "A man who keeps fixing things for people who don't appreciate them will one day run out of tools. Don't wait until then." I read it twice. I put it back. My phone had 17 missed calls by the time I came inside. My mother, 4 times. Ray, 6 times. Connie, twice. A number I didn't recognize, 3 times. My mother again, twice. I turned the phone face down and went to bed. The next morning was a Sunday. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window watching the backyard come into focus as the sun climbed. The bird feeder I'd put up last spring needed to be refilled. I made a note to do that with Sophie later. My phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't pick it up. Renee came downstairs. "Ray called the house phone," she said. "What did he say?" "That Dorothy's back porch gutters are clogged and her basement window lock is broken, and she doesn't know who to call." I poured her a mug of coffee and handed it to her. "I know," I said. "James, I know." She held the mug with both hands. "You don't have to decide anything today." "I'm not deciding anything." I looked out at the bird feeder. "I'm just doing nothing. For once." She was quiet for a moment. "What does that feel like?" I thought about it. "Strange," I said honestly, like I forgot how. The following Tuesday, Ray showed up at my door. He hadn't called first. That told me everything about how the previous 12 years had operated. Nobody had ever needed to ask permission to assume I'd be available. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He looked tired. "You need to come talk to Mom." "Good morning, Ray." "I'm serious. She's upset. The gutters, the window, the property tax bill came, and she doesn't know what account it comes from, and she'll need to find out." He stopped. "James, she'll need to find out," I said again. Not unkindly. "I'm not her property manager anymore." His jaw shifted. "You're her son." "I am," I said. "And Renee is my wife." "What happened at that party was assault, Ray. Your mother put her hands on my wife." He looked down. "She didn't. She struck her. In front of our grandchildren." I let that sit for a second. If that had happened on a street corner instead of a backyard, someone would have called the police. The address doesn't change what it was. Ray rubbed the back of his neck. "Nobody's saying it was right. Nobody said it was wrong either. Not at the table. Not after. Not until right now, and only because you need something." He didn't have an answer for that. I looked at him for a long moment. "Come inside," I said finally. He followed me to the dining room. I went to the hall closet and pulled out a file box gray, banged up at one corner, my name on the side in black marker. I set it on the table between us. Ray looked at it the way people look at things they weren't expecting. "What is this?" 12 years. I opened the lid. Inside were folders, each one labeled by year. The first one I pulled out held receipts for gutter repair, roof patching, driveway resurfacing. I set it on the table. The next folder held homeowners insurance renewals, property tax receipts, pest control invoices. Another held medical transport receipts from the 3 years our mother had been unable to drive following her hip surgery. Another held grocery receipts from the months her pension checks had run short. A small spiral notebook lay at the bottom of the box, every page filled with dates and dollar amounts in my handwriting. Ray lifted the notebook. He opened a page at random. March 4th. Replace kitchen faucet cartridge. $38 in parts, 4 hours labor. March 19th. Paid March. Property tax installment. $612. April 2nd. Drove mom to cardiologist. 47 miles round trip. He turned the page. April 17th. Replaced water heater element. $55 parts. 3 hours. He kept turning. His face changed slowly, the way light changes in a room when a cloud passes over the sun. How often were you over there? He asked. Usually twice a week. More when something broke. He looked up. I live 11 minutes from her house. I know. James, I never wanted you to feel guilty about it. I meant that. I hadn't kept records to use as a weapon. I'd kept records because I was an organized man, and it was the kind of thing my father had taught me to do. I kept track because it was the responsible thing to do, not because I was planning to show anyone. He went quiet, turning pages. How much? He said finally. I leaned back in my chair. Somewhere around $58,000. Over 12 years, not counting time. He put the notebook down slowly. $58,000, give or take. He rubbed both hands over his face. I had no idea. I know you didn't. Connie walked in from the front hallway. I hadn't heard her come in. Ray, I've been waiting in the car for... She stopped when she saw the table. She crossed to it and picked up a receipt without asking. What is all this? 12 years of your mother-in-law's house? I said evenly. She set the receipt down. So you kept track. How very calculated of you. I'm a structured man. Always have been. She folded her arms. You're still her son. None of this changes that. No, I said. It doesn't. But there's a difference between a son who helps his mother because he loves her and a son who's expected to keep arriving with his tools, no matter how his wife is treated. I looked at her calmly. That second version of me retired last Saturday. She didn't have a response for that, not a real one. Ray sat at my dining room table for a long time after she went back to the car. He looked at the box, then at his hands, then at the box again. I should have paid attention, he said. You can start now. He looked up. I'm not saying this to punish you, I told him. I'm saying it because you're capable of learning where things are and how they work and what they cost. You just never had to. I closed the lid of the box. Now you do. He nodded slowly. What about Mom? What about her? Are you just done? No contact? No what happens to the relationship? I thought about Sophie's question in the car. Does great-grandma Dorothy not like us because we don't have as much money as Uncle Ray? That depends on her, I said. I'm not done being her son. I'm done being her groundskeeper and her punching bag and her reason to never have to ask Ray for anything. I stood up. What she did to Renee wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern reaching its peak. The apology, if there is one, needs to match that. Ray took the notebook with him when he left. He asked if he could keep it for a few days. I told him he could keep it as long as he needed. 3 weeks passed quietly. Renee started laughing more at dinner. Not performing for the family laughter. Real laughter, the kind that sneaks up on you and spills out before you can stop it. Sophie noticed. Grandma seems different, she told me one afternoon while we were refilling the bird feeder. Lighter or something. She is, I said. Is it because we don't go to great-grandma's anymore? Kids ask the questions adults spend years carefully arranging furniture in front of. I set down the birdseed. When someone has been holding their breath for a long time, I said slowly, and they finally get to exhale, they feel lighter. Sophie thought about that. How long was Grandma holding her breath? Longer than she should have had to. Sophie twisted the cap back onto the birdseed container. Because of you? I looked at her. Because you kept telling her to be patient? I was quiet for a long moment. Yes, I said, partly because of me. She didn't say anything after that. She didn't need to. 14-year-olds who love you know when to let something sit. A letter arrived the second week of July. My mother's handwriting on the front. I stood in the driveway holding it for a full minute before I brought it inside. Renee was in the kitchen. She looked at the envelope, then at me. Do you want me to? I've got it. I sat at the dining room table alone and opened it. It was short. 5 sentences in her careful, slightly arthritic cursive. James, I have been doing a lot of thinking. I said things and I did something that I cannot take back. I am not going to pretend that I don't know that. I would like to see the family if you'll allow it. I understand if the answer is no. I read it several times. Then I folded it and put it on the counter and didn't make any decisions for 2 weeks. It was Sophie who settled it, without meaning to. She was helping me sand down a rough patch on the back deck one Saturday morning when she asked, out of nowhere, "Do you think great-grandma Dorothy is sorry?" I think she might be getting there. Sophie ran her sandpaper along the plank, checking the grain. There's a difference between sorry and just wanting things to go back to normal, right? There is, I said. Exactly right. How do you know which one it is? I set my sandpaper down. You wait, I said. And you watch what they do, not what they say. She nodded slowly, like she was filing it away. We had a 4th of July cookout, just our family, Marcus and the kids, and Renee's sister Carol and her husband. It was the loudest, simplest, most relaxed afternoon I could remember in years. Nobody monitored their words. Nobody braced for a comment. Sophie and Marcus's youngest ran through the sprinkler until they were both soaked, and Renee served the sweet potato pie she'd been making since her own grandmother taught her. And for once there was nobody at the table who thought that pie needed to be compared to anything bought from a bakery. I sat in my lawn chair watching all of it and thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like. In late August, Ray called. He sounded different, not exhausted and demanding the way he had at my door in June, but quieter, slower. I've been going over to Mom's, he said, twice a week. I didn't say anything. The gutters are cleaned out. I had to look up how to do it. A pause. Did you know there's a tag on the water shutoff valve in her utility room? I put that there in 2019. I know. I read it. Another pause. Mom told me to call you. What did she say? She said. He stopped. She said she was wrong. About Renee. About a lot of things. And that she didn't say that in the letter the way she should have. I let the silence hold for a moment. She'd like to see you, he said. All of you. No pressure, no occasion, just, he trailed off. I'll talk to Renee, I said. There was one more thing I needed to do first, though. I brought the question to Renee that evening on the back porch. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've loved about her for 31 years. When I finished, she was quiet for a while. I don't need an apology to move forward, she said. I know you don't, but you deserve one. I do, she nodded. And I'd like her to know that what she did hurt Sophie, not just me. I'll make sure she understands that. She reached over and held my hand. I'll follow your lead. No, I said. We go together. Same lead. She smiled at that. Really smiled. I called Ray the next morning and told him we'd come. I also told him what I expected. A real conversation, not a performance. That if Dorothy wanted to speak to Renee, she would do it with everyone present. And that Sophie was not to be shielded from the apology she had been there. She deserved to hear it. Ray was quiet for a moment. Then he said, okay. We drove to Millbrook Drive on a Saturday morning in early September. The trees had just started to turn. My mother's yard looked smaller to me than it ever had, though I don't think it had changed at all. Ray's car was already in the driveway. He met us on the front walk, looking like a man who'd been up since 5. She's in the living room, he said. Dorothy was sitting in her good chair, the blue upholstered wingback near the window. She looked her age in a way she usually worked hard to avoid. No jewelry except her wedding ring. Her hands were folded on her lap. She looked at Renee first. I've been trying to figure out how to start this for 2 months, she said. Her voice was steady, but barely. I keep rewriting it in my head. Renee sat down across from her. I sat beside Renee. Sophie sat beside me. Dorothy looked at her great-granddaughter for a moment. Something moved across her face. Grief, maybe, or the particular shame of being seen clearly by someone young enough to still believe people should do better. I owe you the most, she said to Sophie. You didn't do a thing wrong, and you had to sit in that car all the way home carrying something no young person should have to carry. Sophie looked at her steadily. I asked Grandpa why you didn't like us. Dorothy closed her eyes briefly. I know. What did you answer? Renee asked me quietly. That she forgot what love looks like. Dorothy looked down at her hands. I grew up with very little, she said slowly. Not poor the way people say it carelessly. Poor the way it follows you. The way it makes you feel like you'll never be taken seriously no matter how far you get from it. She paused. I spent most of my life making sure no one could look down at me again. She looked at Renee. And instead of recognizing that you'd done the same thing, raised a family with your own hands, built something real, I resented you for reminding me of where I started. The room was very still. What Connie said at that table, Dorothy continued, I should have stopped long before that day. I let it go on because some part of me agreed with her, and I am ashamed of that. Her voice cracked once. What I did to you was wrong. There is no version of that afternoon where I was anything but wrong, and I am sorry. I am genuinely sorry, Renee. Renee was quiet for a long moment. I accept that, she said finally. I want you to know that it wasn't just that afternoon. It was 12 years of small things that you watched happen and said nothing. I need you to understand that the hurt doesn't only live in what happened at the party. Dorothy nodded. I know. And Sophie needs to be able to come into this house and never feel like she has to earn her place here. She doesn't, Dorothy said. She never did. I failed to show her that. Sophie had been very still through all of this. Then she leaned forward slightly. I still have the pasta salad recipe you gave me last Easter, she said. I made it twice. Dorothy looked at her, her eyes filled. Did it turn out? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. First time it was too salty, Sophie said matter-of-factly. Second time it was pretty good. Dorothy laughed, a real one, brief and watery. Nobody rushed to fill what came after. Some moments need a little space around them to breathe. Ray and I cleaned up the kitchen later while Renee and Dorothy sat together at the dining room table going through old photographs. I could hear them talking in low voices. Once I heard Renee laugh at something, Ray handed me a dish to dry. I owe you an apology too, he said, not just for what happened. For 11 years of living 11 minutes away and letting you do everything. You can fix that going forward, I said. I already started. I believed him. Before we left, Dorothy walked me to the front door. She held onto my arm for a moment, the way she had when I was small, and she was seeing me off to school. Your father would have stepped in sooner, she said. He always knew when to say enough. He taught me, I said. I just took longer to listen. She patted my arm once and let go. On the drive home, Sophie was quiet in the back seat for a while. Then she said, Grandpa. Yeah, sweetheart. I think she meant it. I think so too. Are things going to be different now? I looked at Renee. She was watching the road ahead with the particular piece of someone who has set something down that they've been carrying for a very long time. They already are, I said. Sophie seemed to accept that. She leaned against the window and watched the Tennessee trees go by, the late summer light going gold through the leaves. That evening, after Renee had gone upstairs, I sat on the back porch alone for a while. The neighborhood was quiet. The bird feeder swung slightly in the breeze. Somewhere down the block, someone's kids were still playing outside, their voices drifting over the fence. I thought about my father's note. Don't wait until then. I'd waited longer than I should have. That was true. But there's a particular kind of man who mistakes endurance for strength, who keeps absorbing the cost because he believes that's what love requires, and who doesn't learn until something innocent and clear-eyed asks a question he can't answer with a smile and a silence. Sophie had asked me that question in the car on the way home from a party that was supposed to celebrate something good. And because she asked it, I finally answered it. Not just to her, to myself. If there's anything I'd want you to take from this, if you've ever been the one who fixed everything, paid for everything, smoothed everything over, while the people you loved were quietly ground down, I want you to know that stepping back is not the same as walking away. Protecting your family is not betrayal. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for everyone, including the people who hurt you, is to stop making it so easy for them to keep doing it. The ones who truly love you will find their way to the table again. And the ones who don't will show you, finally and clearly, that the table was always yours to set. Thank you for sitting with me through this one, friends. If this story reminded you of someone in your own life, I hope it also reminded you that it's never too late to choose the right people. Don't forget to share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't fix something, it's finally put the tools down. When James stopped absorbing every cost in silence, he didn't lose his family. He gave the people he loved room to breathe and gave the people who'd hurt them a real reason to change. Loyalty without limits isn't strength, but love that holds its ground gently, without bitterness, always finds a way home. A small note for you. This story was created and fictionalized by AI, crafted to bring you a moment of entertainment while sharing a lesson worth carrying into your own life.